Okay, good afternoon. Scott Luton and Greg White with you here on Supply Chain Now. Welcome to today's live stream. Today's show, we're going to be speaking with a thought leader in supply chain, especially from a technology and a planning strategy standpoint. So stay tuned for what should be an outstanding conversation that will certainly raise your supply chain IQ. Quick programming note before we get started here today. If you enjoy our live stream episode, be sure to check out our podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Today, we published a wonderful episode featuring Jan van Niekerk with Spotsy. So if you're curious about what supply chain visibility has to do with NASA landing on the moon, you have to check out the episode and find out exactly what I'm talking about. Again, find us wherever you get your podcast from. So we'll welcome in my fearless, esteemed co-host, Mr. Greg White, serial supply chain tech entrepreneur and trusted advisor. Greg, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You know, Scott, one of these times we got to flip the script here, and I'll introduce you in a really glorious way. Okay. Right?
Absolutely. Let's do it. We'll do it tomorrow.
That's right, folks.
I'm really excited about today's live stream, though. I think we have a series of great guests. Our guest today is not new to Supply Chain Now. We've been fortunate to feature her on a variety of podcasts and her firm, who does some really big things in the industry. And so we really, with no further ado, no reason for delay, right?
Let's get it.
So I want to welcome in Karin Bursa, Chief Marketing Officer and Executive Vice President with Logility, which is a leading supply chain technology firm based right here in Atlanta, the supply chain city. Karin, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon. It's great to be with you guys.
Great to reconnect today. Absolutely. We've been so busy in these unique and challenging times. It's great to reconnect with known leaders, folks we've collaborated with previously and have done such a great job, from panels to podcasts to keynotes. So it's great to have you here for the first time on Supply Chain Now live stream.
Yeah, absolutely. I listen all the time, so it's fun to be with you guys and to see you face to face. It's always a great thing, right?
This is as face to face as we're going to get for a while, so we'll take it, right?
Yes, absolutely. Where would we be without it? I think I'd be going stir crazy about now.
Yeah. Well, we've got hello to all of our folks across the channels that are dialed in for this live stream. Great to have you join us. And Karin, we want to give these great people the same opportunity we've had for, going back probably 15 years, the opportunity to get to know you a little bit better. So tell us about yourself.
All right, great. Well, as you mentioned, I'm Chief Marketing Officer, Executive Vice President with Logility. Logility is headquartered in Atlanta, which is supply chain city, as you said. And what we do is help companies plan more effectively, more efficiently. And in fact, we can help automate many of those planning functions. We work with a variety of companies in a number of different industries, from food and beverage to apparel to retail to durable goods and furniture. So chances are your cupboards may be full with products that were planned by our customers, Heinz and Post and Mondelez, Tillamook, just to name a few, or maybe you're using some of the products in your home office now, or your personal products. So Logility is really focused on supply chain planning and has given me a fantastic opportunity to work with thought leaders across the industry.
Outstanding. And y'all have grown so much. Back when we first met, you were growing, and y'all seem like you've accelerated that growth in the last few years. So,
I, for one, would like to thank you for Tillamook. Whatever you're doing to keep them in stock, keep it up.
Do you know, they're growing like gangbusters, and
they are in our house.
If you haven't tried their ice cream, you need to move into the frozen section and give their ice cream a try, because that's the newest part of their portfolio.
We have 6 half-gallons of ice cream in our Tillamook alone. Old-fashioned vanilla. The white chocolate raspberry is delicious.
It is.
I can't remember. Chocolate chip. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff.
That's what we're eating. Wow.
Well, hey, really quick, want to thank Natalie for joining us here. She, I believe, is out in Vegas. She's part of the supply chain real estate industry. So hello, Natalie. Okay, so let's shift gears to our current environment a bit. We named this supply chain front and center during a crisis because it really has been leading, and it'll continue to do so, lead us right into the aftermath, of course, with plenty of lessons learned. But, I'm amazed. We were talking about this a little bit pre-show. I'm amazed almost daily with just who says the phrase supply chain these days. I mean, from press conferences to TV shows, you name it. And that's, despite all of the folks, all of us that are having a challenging time, some, of course, with losses, whether it's, family or jobs or economic, we're going to break through. But one of the silver linings, that can be found is how this industry, supply chain industry, is going to be so much more visible in the years to come and in the next couple of generations from this. So, so let's start with Karin as we kind of dive more into the industry. What are some initial observations related to what supply chains are doing in this environment?
So I'm totally with you guys. When we think about how front and center supply chain is, I mean, almost every day in White House briefings, you hear the words supply chain. It gives me goosebumps. I mean, it's awesome from the perspective that I think it's identifying this really important skill set in the industry that helps products get to the right place at the right time at the best possible cost. And it's exciting that I've got family members who all of a sudden are super interested in understanding more about the supply chain. And so I think that gives us as professionals, as experts in this area, an opportunity to really be viewed as supply chain heroes, as the folk that are helping a business plan or replan and respond to new market needs. I think we're going to see more change, Scott and Greg, in the next 24 months than we've seen in the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
And it's going to be good, positive change. I wish it was without pain, but I think that that pain will be worth something as we come out stronger businesses in the future, better skills, and more automation.
Great point. Great point. And real quick, I want to follow up on that point she just made. And Greg, I want to get your take on it. But real quick, Keith Singleton, I don't know if Karin, if you remember Keith.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great people. He's been on the show before too. Great perspective. He's joined in and says hello, as well as Mauricio. Hello, Mauricio. Hope this finds you well. Thanks for joining us here today. Okay, so Greg, what on that first point Karin just made? Your take.
Well, I mean, I think it's true. Look, the reason that the supply chain has recovered so rapidly, relatively rapidly, I know it felt painful for consumers, but if you consider the volume uplift that we looked at, the reason that it has recovered so rapidly is that we're so used to crisis.
Yes.
Right. I mean, what you do in supply chain is you try to predict what you can't possibly see coming, and you try to provision for that without breaking the bank by carrying all the inventory you might possibly ever need. Right. So it's a very delicate balancing act, and it's something that people have been doing in some form or fashion for centuries, literally. But even recently, in just the last 20 or 30 years, they've been doing more and more with technology. And I think what you're seeing is, and Karin, you've probably had to do this. Scott and I have both. We've been interviewed by everybody you can possibly imagine: USA Today, CNN, NBC, whoever. And we have seen some people who didn't really know anything or care anything about supply chain until now, and we've had to go through that really basic explanation because I think people are out there thinking, "How could you run out of toilet paper?" And
how could you run out of toilet paper?
Yeah, the reality of it is there are really good reasons for it, right?
Yes.
Mostly because, as we have been saying for weeks, it was a demand problem, not a supply problem, right? We saw 150% demand uplift, and you just don't predict. Frankly, you can't store enough toilet paper because of the bulk of it in a store to account for that kind of uplift, even if you wanted to. So we're seeing a lot of those dynamics and that sort of thing. But the truth is what we're really seeing is the recoverability of supply chain. I think that's really, you know, I don't know, I guess I'm prideful for all of our fellow associates in supply chain to see them.
Absolutely. I'm right there with you. I am so proud of how our, how our skill sets and our roles in these companies are being highlighted in very positive ways, whether it's replanning a product that exists or creating net new product and quickly using resources that are available to innovate and satisfy a need in the marketplace, whether it's for personal protective equipment, things that they're raw materials were not initially planned for or procured for, but that they can be quickly converted, manufactured, and distributed in a timely fashion to meet those industry needs. And that's pretty cool.
So we're going to move really fast today in today's hour-long live stream. And if you're listening to us, if you're connected with us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube or LinkedIn or Twitch, hey, let us know you're here. So shoot us a little comment or observation, chime in on the conversation. We're going to probably take more comments and questions because we've got some great stuff that we want to hear Karin weigh in on. Sorry, after 15 years, you think I get that right? But first question, as we were planning today's conversation, Karin and Greg, we had to take some stuff out because we weren't sure if we were going to get to everything. And one of our first questions comes from Fatima, who has joined us here before. Hello, Fatima. Thanks for tuning in again. She asked a quick question, and if y'all would weigh in on this in a lightning round manner, right? Just a couple of points, because it's a good one. Fatima asked, what factors need to be considered for transforming business to digitization and agile supply chain? So if you had a couple of things that come to mind, of course, we can't do it justice, but a couple of things that come to mind, what would those things be? And Karin, let's start with you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to keep it really simple. So the thing that comes to mind is digitization or transformation around digitizing your business allows you to replace inventory with information. So the idea is that you don't need as much buffer inventory or stock if you know more about your supply and your demand and have the ability to balance that. So that's why I think a huge value proposition is available to companies in every industry.
Great point. That's perfectly succinct.
Okay.
Real quick, Keith agreed with what you were saying earlier, Greg. It's about being nimble. It's about being strategic and having the ability of executing tactical goals flawlessly, is what Keith shared there. But Greg, back to Fatima's question, your take on digital transformation.
It's an absolute necessity. The companies that will come out of this surviving and thriving will be the companies that have already embraced it. The companies that will come out of it limping and crying are the companies that will need to embrace it if they're still able to. But I think what we've realized is that no longer should we count on manual processes for certain. Human discernment in most cases is wrong. In fact, 84% of the time, statistically, humans are incorrect. And spreadsheets. Do I need to say more?
All right. We love our
No, you don't need to say more about spreadsheets.
Yeah.
All right. Real quick, Carla Parvin. Hello, Carla. Thanks for tuning in. Another great Apex colleague of ours. Victor Chin says, hello, Greg. Good to see you. And
looking
Joseph,
good, Victor.
Joseph Moretta is tuned in. Joe, hopefully this finds you well. And he says, really good content. Supply chain truly is the backbone of the economy. Agility is another hot topic that enables execution, is what Joseph Moretta shared. Okay, so let's keep driving. Mohammed, I see your question. I'm going to hold that back until as we get a little deeper in the discussion here, but thanks for joining us on Facebook. So Greg, let's go to our next segment. I know you've got some questions and thoughts for Karin around S&OP, right?
Yeah. So first of all, define it for people, if you wouldn't mind, and then try to relate into how people can use it, utilize it, benefit from it in this situation, and then moving through to the aftermath.
Absolutely. So S&OP, or sales and operations planning, is exactly what it sounds like. How do I satisfy my sales with my available operational capabilities, whether that's manufacturing or distribution, and get our products to the right customers at just the right time? The thing that's interesting about sales and operations planning, or S&OP, is how it has continued to evolve. So it's not just volume metric, how much and where, it's also financial. What can I afford to invest, and what do I expect in return? And can I do that where I'm evaluating multiple scenarios for my business or for the market conditions? And when you're dealing with times like we are right now, you definitely need the ability to compare multiple scenarios, multiple outcomes, and approaches to market opportunity. How's that? How'd I do, Greg?
I think that was pretty good because you made me understand it. Can I give you like an 8-year-old description?
Sure, please.
It's interpreting your salespeople's excessive enthusiasm,
Right.
and your finance people's dream killer nature, and putting operations right in the middle to try and make an unrealistic forecast work with an impossible budget.
You got it. Fair? I think that describes a lot. There's a lot of pain and experience that's coming through in that definition.
Well, it is in a lot of cases. It is a negotiation in a way.
It is, absolutely. It is a trade-off.
That's what the trade-offs are there.
It is. And that's why you need those scenarios, and you need to be able to model what those outcomes will be, and and accuracy around what that sales team can in fact do and deliver for the business.
Well, and you mentioned it earlier when talking about digital transformation, the more accurate, and I'm not going to say forecast necessarily, but the more accurate your management of demand, meaning if you can minimize the amount of safety stock, as you were talking about before, to support variations in demand or variations in lead time.
Absolutely.
The more effective you are at that, the better your plan will be, and the more adaptable it'll be as well.
Great point.
You and I are on the same page. Scott, what you got?
Real quick, I want to say hello. We've got a couple of questions I'm going to hold back just for momentarily, but thanks for joining us, Swetha and Aldo. I really appreciate that. Appreciate your comments, and I'll try to get to your questions here momentarily. Karin, back to S&OP. Certainly risk mitigation, risk management, that's been moving back to the forefront for years now in supply, everywhere, but especially in supply chain. And we'll continue to see that, certainly in light of the pandemic and some of the gaps that global supply chains found during this time frame. Let's talk about how S&OP, I think one of the risks is not having a smart inventory approach and not having your finger really on the pulse of what your customers are after. I would argue that's a pretty big risk. How do you see S&OP and the modeling that you were talking about factoring into a company's overall risk management strategy?
So a lot of companies really have a handicap in that they use one inventory policy across their full portfolio of products, regardless of if they're fast movers or slow movers or seasonal items or new intros. They're really limited with the support of their digital planning platforms. And certainly if they're in Excel, that's a very limiting factor, as Greg mentioned. What these digital platforms allow you to do is add that precision, that automation, apply machine learning and some artificial intelligence to serve up a better answer. I wish I could tell you it would be 100% accurate, but if it were, it would be an order and not a forecast.
Right.
But lots of opportunity to drive smarter decisions about what to inventory and how much safety stock to hold.
Yeah. Wow. So I'm gonna go ahead and pose this question. And Greg, sorry to kind of butt in here. I want to pose a question. It's kind of related. And by the way, a comment from a UGA student named Tanner. Will be interesting to see how those in S&OP minimize bullwhip effect after demand for things such as toilet paper decrease. Good point there, Tanner. Question. I think
Tanner's going to be on the show.
I think you're right. I think you're right.
I think he's a member of the supply chain council there, like our dog. right?
Very good.
Sway Phillips.
All right. So, question from Swetha, and a lot of companies are talking about mapping their suppliers down to third and fourth tier suppliers to understand risks. Is this feasible in real time? Is his first question. Is there an efficient way of doing it? Question two. And then a lot of third and fourth tier suppliers, he says, are not tech savvy. So how do you execute it? Any initial thoughts there in terms of mapping that out?
Is that for me?
Please,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It is feasible. It is possible. In today's day and age where like we're communicating virtually right now, you can do the same thing with your planning systems. All they need is a browser. That's it.
Yeah.
And you can communicate and work on collaboratively the exact same plan or the execution of the plan your business has put into place. Get out of the spreadsheets, get out of email, and have everybody working from the same set of data. It is totally possible. It's happening today. And I expect that we will see it grow exponentially in the coming months ahead.
Love that, Karin. All right. So, Greg, any additional thoughts on that same question?
Well, companies have been going this direction for a lot of years for a lot of reasons. Not the least is sustainability initiatives and fair trade initiatives. And, we've been talking with a lot of people who are trying to eliminate forced labor, real slavery, conflict minerals and things like that in the supply chain. And so there are a lot of mechanisms, even aside from planning, just in terms of supplier compliance that enable you to do that. And, and as Karin said, all it really takes is a browser. You can virtually simulate a spreadsheet. If you have to have that look and feel to feel comfortable, you can simulate that in a lot of today's technologies and have your own view, which is really what most people use a spreadsheet for anyway. And have your own view. So yeah, it certainly is feasible. It's more than feasible. It's an absolute necessity these days.
Great point. Okay. So again, to the folks that are tuned in, Tanner is going to be on the show. He's one of the three folks. He's currently he's a transportation specialist, interning in that critical aspect of supply chain. So Tanner, looking forward to getting your thoughts here later this week. Also, quick shout out to Troy Boozer, who served as a fellow data analyst in the Air Force with me, feels like forever ago. And he was early into big data. If you remember, when we still use that cliche. So Troy, I hope you're doing well, you and your family. That's right. And then one final comment from Aldo, and then we'll get back to a couple other insights from Karin. Hello, thanks for sharing your knowledge and experience with us. You're a big help in focusing on what matters right now. So I really appreciate that from Aldo, and thanks for tuning in. Okay.
Oh, that's better than what your family said, Karin.
That's right.
That's better than your family caring about what you do for a living.
All right. So moving right along, we've got a couple of questions in the tank that I'm going to hold because I want to get through all of the really cool stuff we've got teed up with Karin. So Karin, any final really important points about S&OP before? I mean, we could do hours and hours of really cool content on S&OP, but what else do you think should be said here today in light of the current environment before we move over to some really good news?
So I think that my message would be get started. If you don't have an S&OP process in place, it's happening in your business anyway. Let's formalize that process. Let's get your team on the same page, and let's knock down those data silos. And as Greg said, let's get rid of those spreadsheets in the process. You're going to find you've got better visibility. You're going to have more predictability of what your market needs, and you're going to understand new and insightful things about your business. So there's value at every level of maturity in sales and operations planning, and everybody's got to start somewhere. So my encouragement would be get started now.
Love that, Karin. And also with you, Greg, one final thought about S&OP on your end.
Yeah, so my great uncle used to say, do something if you do it wrong. And you are doing something now, and it is probably wrong. So just put a little more structure around it and And as Karin said, if you systematize it and you build business rules and you measure, you can only manage what you measure, then you will get better. And also think of supply chain planning not as a theoretical, but a practical and an adaptability exercise. You can always replan periodically, and if you put the right disciplines in place, you can make that a relatively light process. Again, think about what you're doing and think about the time you're spending putting out fires. Don't reward the arsonist, right? By continuing to start fires. Figure out a way to prevent them.
All right. Good stuff. Keith weighs in here. High demand is a good problem to have. I agree with that. S&OP that is good has its pulse on effective forecasting and, again, execution. All the great plans and goals mean nothing if you can't execute. Keith goes on to say, customers and consumers respond to timely response by an effective supply chain. S&OP is a true symbol of cohesive communication. Good stuff there, Keith. All right. So let's move over now that we've kind of wrapped up the S&OP segment, even though it could have gone on for hours and hours. We love good news here at Supply Chain Now, Karin. And although we're already, I can show you my tattoo, big Karin, Bursa, and Logility fans. In particular, I love what you've been doing. I've noticed it most in LinkedIn, where you've been highlighting some of the awesome things that companies are doing to figure out where they can get in a very practical and impactful way into the battle against COVID-19. There's some really inspirational, good news stories there. So please share a few of your favorite examples in that regard.
Yeah, and thank you for that, because I've been so impressed. You would think I'm like this proud mama of all these Logility customers that have really mobilized to fight COVID-19 in some form or fashion. One of the most interesting is a company that you probably don't even recognize. The company's name is Rockland Industries, but one of their primary lines of business is that they make wet wipes. And what they were able to do very quickly is they switched the mix of product so that they removed scented product and they focused on disinfectant product. And they actually added another shift. So they're running 3 shifts on a global basis and are responding to a spike in demand of 400%.
Wow.
And they're doing that because they can plan and replan. So they're actually hiring in the midst of this COVID-19 crisis.
That is remarkable. That 400% figure. I mean, that really, to put crazy demand. I've heard 30, 40 year long food industry senior executives, folks that have really seen it all, talk about how some of the food demand is some of the record-shattering demand. So to hear 400% really puts it in perspective. Holy cow! Who can plan for 400%?
Well, that's where you need the ability, as Greg was saying, to plan and replan, to look at your model. What do I do? How do I add resources? Do I add staffing? Can I run my lines longer? If I do a narrower product set, can I run longer runs for my business and get it distributed in a timely fashion? And they're just a great example, but it doesn't stop there. I mean, we have customers whose businesses on the surface are really suffering as a part of all the shutdowns. When you think of many of the fashion and apparel customers that we serve, companies like VF Corporation and Under Armour and New Balance and Hanes brands, but these companies quickly said, what can we produce? What can we do with the available materials and assets and production capabilities we have that can help in this fight? So many of them quickly switched over to personal protective equipment, to PPE, making masks and gowns and getting that out to our frontline medical workers so that they can serve those in need and be safe at the same time.
So on that note, so we all have fascinating conversations during times like this. Everyone certainly has an opinion and a take on kind of what we're facing. If you doubt for 1 minute, if you're listening to the show and you doubt for 1 minute what healthcare professionals face and their concerns, their anxieties, what they need, go out and talk with them, because I know we've heard from coast to coast what they're facing, and there's a reason why we're trying to shift anything we can over to producing PPE and getting it to the brave professionals on the front line. So I think I just saw yesterday that FedEx added, I think, 150 routes to Asia to bring to air cargo in additional PPE supplies. That's great to see. All right, so I know you've got probably a couple other examples, Karin, and to our audience, if you know of a company that's really doing the right thing and jumping into the battle and helping globally, drop it in the comments, and we'll try to read and get to as many of them as we can. Greg, what's a good news story that's between your ears right now?
Well, one that stands out is one that always stands out, and that's Enrique Alvarez and his team at Vector Global Logistics. They actually have philanthropy as part of their business plan. They provide, depending on which office, let's just talk about the U.S. office, they provide 100 meals in Africa for every container that they ship. And one of the things that they're doing now, they do that every day, by the way. But one of the things they're doing during COVID-19 is helping some of their clients who have implored them to help find sources for PPE products and to vet those sources, and then to help get the orders placed and get those shipped, to their destinations. And they're doing a lot of that. Up all hours of the day and night to get that done. I mean, there are a lot of scenarios like that where companies are doing great things. EAL Green, so I can't believe it, but Claudia Freed is not watching us, or at least she hasn't sounded off yet today.
Not yet.
But probably because she's so tired, because her company is also a philanthropy, is also sourcing and providing PPE products to healthcare providers.
That's a great point. We interviewed Rise Against Hunger the other day. We'll be publishing that podcast next day or two. And on that nonprofit note, it's amazing that need does not go away just because we're all experiencing unique times. And to see these brave supply chain leaders within these nonprofits figure out a way to still get things done and help the people that they are committed to helping, that's certainly good news.
Yeah.
Keith D, a different Keith, not Keith Singleton. Keith D says, we saw the same quick change from manufacturing one type of product to another during World War II. Guns to butter, right? We've all studied that in our history classes. Okay, so Karin, what else, good news related, whether it's clients or non-clients or other stories that you found uplifting and inspirational during these times, what else are you keeping your finger on the pulse of?
Yeah, so I think we were talking earlier, but the food sector, right? That folks have switched to moving at home. We've got an unemployment level that came upon us very suddenly, and we're in double digits. And another Logility customer, Smithfield Foods, so make bacon. Bacon always connects, right? But I saw a report on them this morning that they're moving a lot of protein product to Feeding America for just that reason, that the food lines have grown exponentially, and they've got an opportunity to serve those folks. And again, it's just a proud moment, right? You just feel good about the businesses that we serve in the way that they are responding to real need in our community.
That's a great point. And we've tried, through all of our programming here in recent weeks, we've really tried to share that message. We've got to protect that workforce, food industry, of course, healthcare and first responders and all the folks that make, life happen. But, I think one of the big lessons learned, we were talking pre-show, as more and more consumers understand supply chain and what allows those products to be put conveniently on the shelves, we got to protect those folks. And we're seeing some companies getting really serious about making sure their workforces are protected. That's really important. Greg, anything else when we talk about, the good news and some of the inspirational stories, what else sticks out?
Well, we were just talking about food. So I'd just like to thank and acknowledge anyone who is showing up at work at a restaurant, at a retail store, in a warehouse, in a manufacturing center. Anyone who is just showing up for work is on the front lines, in my opinion. And I just really appreciate what they're doing. And we talked a little bit about it yesterday. If you have been shopping, and I have recently, if you have been shopping, and I'm not very good at it. So I spent a little bit of extra time in the store. I'm not very good at it. But just to see the spirit of the people that are doing it, I think is really, really uplifting, right?
Yep.
They're not just there. They're there and serving and enjoying it. And, and they brighten your day by being in there.
Yep. So want to share a comment from our YouTube listenership. Alberto is looking to like maybe form some daily discussions around some of these topics that are impacting global supply chains during this challenging environment. So Alberto, however we can help in that regard, we're just about daily, it feels like, on these live streams. And of course, we publish daily podcasts, a lot of which contain best practices for, against the backdrop of COVID-19. But to our listeners, anyone listening now can reach out and connect with Alberto on YouTube for additional note comparing sessions.
Scott, if I could interrupt it, COVID-19 is in fact a huge global disruption, but these supply chain professionals, they deal with disruptions all the time. Now, we haven't ever encountered something like this in the last 100 years where everybody is impacted all at once. But if you think of the avian bird flu, or you think of a packaging problem, or the port closures, all of those activities in the marketplace, those disruptions require these businesses to respond, to replan, and to look at alternatives in the process. So, kudos to all the supply chain professionals out there, because they are problem solvers. That's what they do each and every day.
Excellent point. So kind of along those lines, I want to pose this question to both of you from Fatima again. Fatima, you've got some killer questions today. So basically she asked, other than agile and lean supply chain models, what other models should we be considering to be more prepared to meet uncertain situations? Is it what answers come to mind initially? Greg, let's start with you.
It's hard for me to say agile versus lean or anything like that. The principles of those are usually very specific to either manufacturing or a segment of industry. I can tell you this, and this, I think Karin and I have both known all of our careers. The forecast is not the magic. Predicting the problem, predicting the uplift, predicting the downturn, predicting this disruption, that's not the solution. The solution is rapid and effective responsiveness. So whatever you can do to build rapid responsiveness into your business is the most important thing you can do. We've seen it. I know, Karin, you guys sell the same technology to manufacturers that Blue Ridge, my company, sells to retailers and distributors, and everyone thinks with a better forecast they're going to solve the problem. And I tell them repeatedly, the forecast is just the foundation. And the first thing that you learn about a forecast is that it's wrong. It's just the matter of degrees by which it is wrong. So you have to create that responsiveness, and the more intelligent and economically based that responsiveness is, the better off you're going to be. And you talked earlier, Karin, about visibility. You have to have visibility to know when you have to intervene. In fact, we talked about trying to get manual human interactions out of the system, but there is a time at which you have to intervene and insert your knowledge into the system so the system can respond more appropriately. So that visibility gives you the ability to respond rapidly as well.
Good stuff, Greg. Karin.
Yeah, I totally agree with Greg. I think he and I could go on for hours on this topic, but the demand signal is important. It's foundational because it's what we expect in the future. And the reason that we want to know that is so that we can procure, produce, and distribute according to that plan. But it is a plan. It doesn't execute perfectly each and every time, which is why we have things like safety stock. What if we were off by 10% or 20%? How do we then pivot to be able to take advantage of those opportunities or mitigate risks, Scott, as you were saying earlier. So, I mean, that's the real value here. And that's where the human talent can come in and look at the multiple scenarios and make the best decision possible and make it very quickly. And that's what supply chain is all about. Let the systems do the churning, if you will, suck in all that big data and look at those demand signals and present you with a plan that's aligned with your business goals.
Great point. Mauricio adds to that, building relationships and networks with manufacturers internationally and domestically is key to responding rapidly. Good stuff there.
Building them always, not just now.
That's right.
And you know, Greg, one thing I think is interesting is that for years we've been all about low-cost providers, right? Or offshoring to take advantage of a lower cost quotient. I think one thing that COVID-19 has taught all of us is that as a part of responding quickly, we need a mix of partners, whether we're sourcing or producing or distributing. And I think that that's going to be one of the big lessons that we learn when we look back at COVID-19 is that we need that mix. And that's one area that we can mitigate risk by having more production maybe back in North America or across the globe versus very centralized maybe in the Asian operations.
Yep. Okay. So I got another tough. So Fatima, great question, by the way. Keep them coming. Hope to see it some future live streams, keeping us on our toes. Here's another tough question from Keith D. He says, even though there are some food industries helping first responders, how do you foresee food supply being impacted? Many meat packaging plants are closed. Some plants are closed. We saw that in the news this week. Possible food shortages in the near future, like toilet paper? ? So it's tough, and as much of a justice to his question in the couple minutes we can give. Karin, initial thoughts?
Yeah, so absolutely. There will be some shortages. I think, if you listen to the news today, there's some surplus that's not making it to market. So there's a lot of fresh produce out there, and that's perishable inventory that normally goes through food service. So how do we direct that nutritious food so that we can get it into some of these programs that are serving people that may be out of work? Or children that were relying on school lunches as one of their meals each and every day. So there's a lot of creativity and collaboration that's happening around that. Some of the protein-based plants that have had closures, most of those closures have been around protecting their employees and making sure that they're going through the right cleaning processes and practices, or because of shift personnel limitation where they're trying to keep a 6-foot distance between their teams and the break rooms are not populated and things along those lines. So some of that slowdown, if you will, is to protect the food supply sector. I think if you look at the middle of the store, demand in areas like cereal or, mixes and foods and cans and bottled beverages, for example, those things have really rallied to the increase in demand. And we're stocking our pantries now instead of going out to eat.
And that can't be overstated enough. If global supply chains weren't as resilient, boy, we would be seeing empty grocery stores.
Absolutely.
So, by and large, a lot of the stuff you're after we kind of got up off the mat, right? And kind of saw the gaps and made some adjustments. A lot of those, Karin, that you were just sharing, we should be celebrating what is on shelves. And while, we're going to see less variety, undoubtedly, and we'll see kind of how, if we can control and protect the workforce, just how limiting or just how much we can limit some of the shortages. That's to be seen. But, I don't know about y'all's household. We've been fortunate out where we live to have what we need and subsist on. And no, we're not eating filet and lobster every night, but the supply chains have been fairly resilient based on what between demand and other factors, what they've faced. Greg, weigh in on food supply.
No, there won't be any there won't be any shortages. There may be incremental outages, but that's, as Karin said, mainly due to the fact that we need to redirect foodstuffs, because 30 to 40% of the food in the United States gets wasted anyway. So no, there won't be shortages. And as many wise people have said, hunger is not a matter of availability. It's a matter of logistics. And what we need to do is we need to redirect food from the channels in which it exists. And Karin was alluding to that. It's in the food service channels that are serving restaurants and schools and prisons and bars and whatever else. And it needs to be redirected. And it is being redirected, by the way.
Right.
Buckhead Meats, I don't know if you know, they sell to the public now. A major beef meat supplier, obviously, Buckhead Meat. They serve to the public like 4 days a week now. And I've gone to some of my favorite restaurants and ordered rice and beans and things like that.
Absolutely.
So there isn't a shortage, at least not in the States. We just need to resource a bit. And I would encourage consumers to do likewise. Go to the places you eat and see if they can get you what you want.
Great point. Real quick, Claudia, just like
hey,
earlier, she says community partners are part of CSR programs that are helping redeploy surplus into the hands of mouths that need them. Great point, Claudia. And hopefully we can find more ways of supporting those organizations. Oftentimes, a lot of them are nonprofits. Okay, so we got to wrap up the food supply. There's so much there, but Karin, I loved your. I could almost envision a checklist of the different conditions that these plants, different conditions and different things they're doing to keep as many members of the workforce protected and keep supply chains moving as possible. All right, so, we're moving into kind of the final segment here, and I've been holding this question back from Muhammad. So Muhammad, I hope you're still there on Facebook with us. We've mentioned a couple of acronyms, including APICS, and we've mentioned, I think, a couple other organizations as part of this conversation. And we also want to ask you about Logility University just in a second. Before we get there, Muhammad asked, what certifications are helpful in a supply chain management career? So, Karin, if you think of a few educational programs that come to mind that you have found beneficial in supply chain leaders using, what would those be?
Absolutely. So, and I can knock off a couple of those acronyms for you. So, a number of great places to look for certification. The first would be what is now called the Association of Supply Chain Management, or ASCM. So it used to be called APICS. So if we confused you with that, that was their founding name. But they offer a whole portfolio of educational materials. In fact, this is where I met Scott first.
Yeah, aren't you two both certified professionals?
Yeah, maybe 15 years ago, Scott, right? It's been quite some time. But Scott has volunteered selflessly in the Atlanta Roundtable for a number of years and was president of the Atlanta Roundtable. So thank you again for all that you've done in that area to serve our community and build skill sets. But that's a great place to start. There's also a group called the Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. It's a mouthful, so we say CSCMP. I know it just kind of rolls off, right? But they do certification as well. So my advice to you, Muhammad, would be look at your role in the company that you're serving and look for a certification that is first and foremost in your area of expertise. And then maybe branch out beyond that and look to really extend your capabilities to have a broader impact on the business. So I think ASCM, CSCMP, and then there's one more, which is IBF, Institute of Business Forecasting. So Greg and I have talked a little bit about the importance of demand planning and forecasting, and also sales and operations planning. And they do a great deal of education and certification in these areas as well.
Yep. Yeah. That's a great, such a powerful, succinct answer. I love, Karin, starting with, hey, what are you trying to do, right? What is your journey? What's that trajectory? What are you trying to accomplish? And then kind of working backwards to figure out, because there's so many associations, there's so many certification programs. but figuring out what's right for you. I would also want to say hello to Patrick Kelly, who's joined us a couple times. I think he has a podcast on the food industry, right? I want to say Greg, produce industry, I believe.
Yes.
So hello, Patrick. I know that industry is really going through some challenges.
Yeah.
Real quick, check out, do your
Always.
homework on, what's that, Greg?
Always. Produce is the toughest thing to manage.
Perishable.
Yeah.
Great point. All right. So, but do your homework, check out the associations. Beyond the certification, I would say make sure you understand how you can use it once you get certified within the association. You know, as Karin just pointed out, we met when she was keynoting one of our events in Atlanta, 15 or so years ago. And so naturally that networking you can do within the association or within the industry that the association serves, that is absolutely critical to maximizing the ROI on the whole experience, certification and beyond. Great question, Mohammed. Okay, so Karin, let's talk about this thing I've heard, Logility University. Tell us more.
Oh, absolutely. So that's another certification that you can achieve. So we opened up the Logility University, which takes all of our online training materials and certification testing. And the goal here is to help our customers gain certification in their discipline using the Logility digital planning solution, right? So that they can look at progressing their career and, again, their value proposition for their businesses. But one of the exciting things about it is we have opened the Logility University up to our customers free of charge for the month of April. So recognizing that some of them are working at home for the first time, and they may have a few quiet hours that they've never had before, and giving them the opportunity to really hone their skills, refresh some of the things they know already, or perhaps learn something new so they can help their companies bounce back faster. And I'm really excited. Within probably 48 hours, we had over 200 folks register and start the courses.
Wow.
I love that. And Mohammed appreciates the perspective you shared, Karin. I love, opening that up and just making it easier to plug into all of this expertise that's going to make operations and organizations stronger, make better professionals. That's such a great move.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun, and it's great to see how customers have responded to that. We've also done a series of tips and techniques that they can use to look at adjusting large swings in demand or responding to new needs or prioritizing products based on a common set of attributes. So just little quick things that just help them use their planning platform more effectively in the light of dramatic change in the market.
Love that, Karin. Okay, so Greg, it's been too long since you weighed in here. When you think about resources, when you think about how we're trying to get better as an industry and as professionals during these times, what are some initial things that come to mind?
Got to find a mentor. Find somebody in your business or in your company even, and get their guidance. You'll know if they're a mentor if they are willingly, freely, openly, and effusively providing you with knowledge and challenging you to learn more.
And don't be fearful of doing reverse mentoring. We've talked about that with Tandria Bellamy and Kareem Million. That's a growing, prevalent practice because it's so effective. In fact, Karin, I might reach out to your son that's incredibly intelligent in financial services and figure out what he could teach me that I'm missing in that arena. So, but kidding aside, reverse mentoring has become such a powerful practice. So let's wrap up on this. So Karin, I want to make sure folks know how to find you and connect with you and compare notes. You're such a wonderful thought leader, all things supply chain. And also, how can folks learn more about Logility?
Absolutely. So we'll start with Logility. So you can find us at logility.com and look at the many great resources that are there on our website. Hopefully there's some information that's going to help you tackle your challenges in front of you today, tomorrow, and in the weeks and months ahead. For me, reach out to me at kbursa@logility.com or hit me up on LinkedIn or Facebook or Twitter, and let's get connected and keep the conversation going.
Absolutely. And in particular, all those channels work great, but check out what Karin is sharing on LinkedIn, especially related to good news, great lessons learned from these companies out there. Some you've heard of, some you hadn't heard of that you need to hear of, and what they're doing right now to fight through and break through. Karin, I really appreciate you joining us here today. It was as fun as I thought it would be, and
as advertised. That's right.
Yes.
You guys are awesome. I tell you, this is really a lot of fun. Thanks for having me.
Definitely. Great guest. Certainly produce great content. So really appreciate you taking time out. So before we go, Greg, I want to wrap up, get your key takeaway or two from our conversation with Karin, and then we'll sign off.
I think that first of all, there's a lot you can learn from this episode alone about what you can do to deal with adverse conditions such as this. But I want to leave you with this thought. If you are fortunate enough after this disruption to have survived building your house on sand, don't be foolish enough to do it after this. Build it on stone. There are so many people. We talked about manual processes. We talked about spreadsheets. We talked about too much human intervention. And we talked about companies who have avoided this digital transformation, who have avoided advancing their companies. Again, if you're lucky enough to survive, fix that first thing.
Great point. Great point. Love that. All right. So I hate to end the conversation here, but we've got to thanks all the wonderful comments and questions we got from across the global supply chain world. Thanks so much for tuning in and for engaging with us. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Karin. To our audience, find us if you enjoyed this. Find us and subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. We do have a special event coming up on April 21st. It's going to be a free webinar in partnership with EFT by Reuters Events, all about global visibility, past, present, and future. And there's going to be lots of lessons learned in that regard here in recent months. Yeah. On behalf of the entire team here at Supply Chain Now, you can check us out at supplychainnowradio.com. But more importantly, we're going to be breaking through. We're going to get into that new normal. It's going to be a lot different than where we've been. But, have the faith. Brighter days lie ahead. Don't panic. Follow the guidelines. We're in a critical time right now, this week and next week. Follow the guidelines. And with that said, we'll see you next time here on Supply Chain Now. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.